Commander Lisa Martinez stood on the bridge of the USS Liberty, watching the alien ships move closer through the darkness of space. The diplomatic meeting was not going well, and she could feel the tension building in the air around her. Amanda. Clark walked up beside her holding a datapad with readings from the alien vessels. The Sylvani ship looked like a work of art with flowing curves and what appeared to be living metal that pulsed with soft blue light. The Kithran Coalition vessel was different, entirely made of dark gray metal with sharp angles and weapon ports that glowed red. Captain Kate Johnson called out from her command chair that both alien delegations were requesting another meeting. Lisa nodded and prepared herself for what might be the final negotiation. The human race had only discovered faster than light travel 50 years ago, and now they faced two massive alien empires who saw them as nothing more than annoying newcomers. The meeting room aboard the Liberty was designed to be neutral, but Lisa could see that their alien guests were not impressed. Zarathiel entered first, and Lisa had to admit the Sylvani princess was beautiful in an otherworldly way. Her skin had a slight luminescence, and her ears came to elegant points. Her eyes were large and seemed to hold ancient wisdom, despite her apparently young appearance behind Zarathiel came Vexara, the military commander of the Kithran Coalition. She was tall and moved with predatory grace. Her skin had a scaled texture, and her eyes were cold yellow slits that seemed to evaluate everything as either useful or threatening. Lisa noticed that Vexara wore multiple weapons. Even to a diplomatic meeting, Lisa took her seat at the negotiation table with Dr. Clark beside her. The talks had been going on for 3 days, and humanity was being asked to choose which alien empire they would submit to. The very idea made Lisa angry, but she kept her expression calm and professional. Vexar spoke first in her harsh voice that sounded like grinding metal. She told the humans that they had one final chance to accept Kithran rule and become a client species under their protection. The alternative, she said, would be the complete destruction of human civilization. Zeri remained quiet, but Lisa caught her glancing at the human delegation with what seemed like curiosity rather than contempt. The Sylvani princess had been mostly silent during the negotiations, but Lisa sensed she was not entirely comfortable with the aggressive approach. Lisa stood up and looked directly at both alien leaders. She told them that humanity had faced extinction before, and had always found a way to survive. She spoke about how humans had overcome ice ages, wars, plagues, and disasters that should have ended their species. She explained that submission was not in human nature, and they would rather fight impossible odds than surrender their freedom. Vexara hissed with what might have been amusement, and told Lisa that human stubbornness was exactly why they needed to be controlled. She activated a holographic display showing a massive weapon mounted on her flagship. The device looked like nothing Lisa had ever seen, with crystalline components that seemed to bend light around them. The Kithran commander explained that this was the reality shatter, a weapon that could tear apart the fabric of space and time itself. She claimed it had been tested on 3 different star systems, and each one had simply ceased to exist, not destroyed but completely removed from reality, as if they had never been there at Altair. Clark leaned forward to examine the holographic display, and Lisa could see the scientist in her taking over. Despite the danger, Amanda asked technical questions about how the weapon functioned, and Vexara seemed pleased to explain how superior Kithran technology was. The reality shatter worked by creating a cascade failure in the quantum field that held matter together. Vexara explained that when fired at a target, the weapon would cause reality itself to forget that the target had ever existed. It was not death or destruction, but complete erasure from the universe. Lisa felt a chill run down her spine, but she refused to show fear. She told Vexara that threats would not change humanity's position, and that Earth had survived worse things than alien ultimatums. The commander's eyes narrowed, and she asked if Lisa was certain about that. Choices finally spoke, and her voice was like music compared to Vexara's harsh tones. She suggested that perhaps there could be another solution that did not involve the complete destruction of human civilization. The Sylvani princess pointed out that Humanity showed remarkable potential and might be valuable allies, rather than subjects. Vexra turned to Zarathiel with obvious irritation and reminded her that the Sylvani Empire had agreed to support Kithrin expansion in this sector. The princess nodded, but said that wisdom sometimes required reconsidering previous agreements, especially when dealing with species that showed unexpected qualities. Lisa saw an opportunity and addressed Zarathiel directly. She asked if the Sylvani truly believed that erasure was preferable to cooperation. The princess hesitated, and Lisa pressed on, explaining that humans had always been willing to work with others as equals, but would never accept domination. The tension in the room grew thicker as Vex realized that her ally might be wavering. She slammed her clawed hand on the table and declared that there would be no more discussion. Humanity had 1 hour to surrender or face complete obliteration. Captain Johnson's voice came through the communication system, reporting that Kithrin ships were powering up their weapons and moving into attack formation. Lisa looked at her companions and saw the same determination in their eyes that she felt in her heart. Lisa stood and told both alien leaders that humanity's answer was no. They would not submit to any empire, regardless of the consequences. She explained that humans would rather die free than live as slaves, and that this choice had been made by countless generations before them. Vexara showed what might have been a smile and told Lisa that she had hoped for this answer because it would allow her to demonstrate the true power of Kithrin technology. She activated her communication device and gave the order to charge the reality shatter weapon. Through the viewports, Lisa could see the massive Kithrin flagship beginning to glow, with an eerie light that seemed to make space itself ripple around it. Dr. Clark was frantically taking readings with her instruments, while Captain Johnson prepared the Liberty for whatever was about to happen. Zarathiel stood as well, and for a moment her eyes met Lisa's. The Sylvani princess seemed to be trying to communicate something without words, but before Lisa could understand the message, Vex activated the reality, shattered the weapon, fired with a sound that seemed to come from everywhere at once. Despite the vacuum of space, the beam that emerged from the Kithrin ship was not light or energy, but something that made reality itself bend and twist as it approached the human fleet. Lisa watched in fascination rather than fear as the impossible weapon reached toward them. She found herself thinking that if this was how humanity ended, at least they would go down fighting rather than kneeling. And then something unexpected happened that would change everything. The reality shatter weapon hit the human fleet, and nothing happened exactly as expected. The beam struck the USS Liberty directly, but instead of erasing the ship from existence, something remarkable occurred. The hull began to glow with the same energy that had been meant to destroy it. Dr. Rebecca Foster was in the science lab when the weapon fired, and her instruments went completely mad. Every reading showed impossible results, as if the laws of physics had suddenly changed around them. She ran to the bridge, where she found Commander Martinez staring in amazement at her hands, which were glowing with soft blue light. Colonel Amy Watson received the emergency alert in her quarters aboard the military escort ship Valiant. She grabbed her gear, rushed to the command center, where her team of ghost walkers were already preparing for combat. What she found instead was her soldiers examining their weapons, which had somehow become more powerful than before. The Kithrin reality shatter had failed in the most spectacular way possible. Instead of destroying the human ships, it had somehow enhanced them. The energy that was meant to erase matter from existence had instead bonded with human technology in ways that made no scientific sense. Lieutenant Nina Ross was piloting her interceptor fighter when the wave hit, and suddenly her small craft was moving faster than should have been possible. Her engines were producing twice their normal output, and her weapons were charging with energy she had never seen before. She contacted the Liberty to report that all human ships were experiencing similar improvements. Vexar stood frozen on the bridge of her flagship, staring at readings that told her the impossible had happened. Her perfect weapon had not only failed, but had somehow made her enemies stronger. The Kithrin commander's reputation was built on the absolute certainty of her technology, and now that certainty was shattered. Dar Foster worked frantically To understand what had happened to them, she ran test after test, and slowly began to piece together an incredible theory. The human ships were not just enhanced, they were somehow immune to reality-warping weapons. Her analysis suggested that something about human quantum signatures made them resistant to attacks that targeted the fundamental structure of space. Tim Zarethiel watched the chaos aboard the Kithran flagship with growing interest. She had sensed something different about the humans from the beginning, and now she understood what it was. They were not like other species that could be easily dominated by superior technology. There was something in their very nature that refused to be controlled. The Sylvani princess made a decision that would have consequences far beyond what she could imagine. She activated a private communication channel and contacted Commander Martinez directly. Her message was simple, but carried enormous risk. She wanted to meet secretly to discuss what had really happened. Commander Martinez received the message while Dr. Foster was explaining her theories about human immunity to reality weapons. The scientists believed that Earth's unique electromagnetic field had caused human DNA to evolve in ways that made them naturally resistant to quantum manipulation. It was as if humanity had been accidentally preparing for this type of attack for millions of years. Colonel Watson was not interested in the scientific explanations. She was a soldier, and she could see that the failed weapon attack was about to be followed by a conventional assault. The Kithran fleet was repositioning for a standard military engagement, and that was something she understood perfectly. Vexa was indeed preparing for total war. Her pride had been wounded by the failure of her Superweapon, and now she wanted to prove Kithran's superiority through sheer force. She gave orders for the largest alien armada in galactic history to converge on human space. Every ship, every weapon, every soldier that the coalition could muster was being called to battle. Zarethiel met with Commander Martinez in secret aboard a small Sylvani scout ship. The princess revealed information that shocked the human officer. The Sylvani Empire had not willingly joined the Kithran coalition, but had been forced into the alliance through threats and blackmail. Many Sylvani leaders wanted to break free, but feared the consequences. The princess explained that her people were naturally peaceful and had advanced through magic and harmony with nature, rather than conquest. The Kithran had demanded their allegiance by threatening to use reality weapons against Sylvani worlds, the same weapons that had just failed against humanity. Lisa Martinez realized that they had a potential ally in Zarethiel, but also understood the enormous risk the princess was taking by even talking to humans. If Vexera discovered this meeting, it would mean death for the Sylvani royal and possibly war between the two alien empires. Dr. Foster continued her analysis and made another startling discovery. The enhancement effect was not temporary. Human ships and weapons had been permanently improved by exposure to the reality shatter beam. She estimated that human technology was now at least 50 years more advanced than it had been an hour before. Lieutenant Nina Ross led the first test flight of enhanced human fighters and reported that the improvements were beyond anything they had hoped for. Her squadron could outmaneuver ships twice their size, and their weapons could penetrate armor that should have been impossible to damage. Kiravel entered the secret meeting as Zarethiel's bodyguard and loyal friend. She had served the princess for decades and had never seen her take such a dangerous risk. The guard was suspicious of humans at first, but as she listened to Commander Martinez speak about human values and principles, she began to understand why her princess was willing to gamble everything. The first skirmishes began when Kithran scouts engaged human patrol ships. The results were shocking to both sides. Human vessels that should have been easily destroyed were winning battles against superior numbers. The combination of enhanced technology and human tactical flexibility was proving devastatingly effective. Colonel Watson deployed her Ghostwalkers in ways that confused and frustrated Kithran. Commander's human special forces used guerrilla tactics that made no sense. According to conventional military doctrine, they would attack seemingly random targets, retreat without engaging in decisive battles, and strike again from completely unexpected directions. Vexer grew more frustrated with each failed engagement. Her commanders reported that human forces were unpredictable in ways that made them impossible to counter effectively. Standard military responses were useless against enemies who seemed to change their entire strategy from moment to moment. Dia Foster made contact with Sylvani scientists through the secret channel established by Zitrathiel. She discovered that elven magic was actually highly advanced science that worked by manipulating quantum fields in ways similar to Kithran technology. The possibility of combining human innovation with Sylvani knowledge excited both species. The war was escalating rapidly as more Kithran ships arrived in human space, but something else was happening as well. Other alien species that had been conquered by the Coalition were watching the conflict with growing hope. If humans could resist the reality shatter weapon, perhaps freedom was possible for others. As well, Zarathiel revealed the most dangerous secret of all. The Kithran Coalition was not as unified as it appeared. Many member species were held in line through fear rather than loyalty. The princess believed that a successful human resistance could inspire rebellions throughout Kithran. Space Commander Martinez realized that they were not just fighting for human survival anymore. They had become a symbol of resistance against tyranny for countless species across the galaxy. The weight of that responsibility was enormous, but it also gave her hope that victory might be possible. The enhanced human fleet began to coordinate with Sylvani forces that had quietly switched sides. The combination of human adaptability, Sylvani precision, and shared determination to be free created a fighting force unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Colonel Watson reported that her intelligence network had identified key weaknesses in Kithran military structure. Their reliance on overwhelming force and standardized tactics made them vulnerable to unconventional approaches. The aliens had never faced enemies who refused to follow predictable patterns. The second part of their struggle ended. The humans and their new Sylvani allies prepared for the greater battles to come. They had survived the Superweapon that should have erased them from existence, and now they were ready to show the galaxy exactly how Earth responds to threats. General Patricia Hayes stood in the war room deep beneath Earth's surface, studying holographic displays that showed the positions of every human ship in space. The Kithran Coalition had assembled the largest military force in galactic history, and it was heading straight for human worlds. She had been given command of Earth's defense, and she intended to show the aliens why that was a mistake. Captain Michelle Turner received her orders aboard the stealth ship Phantom Strike. Her vessel was one of 12 new ships built with technology reverse-engineered from the reality shatter enhancement. Her mission was simple but dangerous: penetrate deep into enemy territory and cause as much confusion as possible. Engineer Tracy Miller worked around the clock in her laboratory, combining human engineering with Sylvani magic technology. The results were weapons and tools that neither species could have created alone. She had successfully merged quantum manipulation with human innovation to produce devices that seemed impossible even to her. The operation General Hayes planned was called Wildcard, and it would either save humanity or destroy them completely. Instead of meeting the Catharan Armada in conventional battle, human forces would strike at targets that made no logical sense. Every attack would be designed to confuse and frustrate enemy. Commander Sarathia had officially broken with the Kithran Coalition and was now working openly as a human ally. Her knowledge of enemy tactics and technology was invaluable, but she was also learning to appreciate human military thinking. The princess found human strategies fascinating because they seemed to embrace chaos rather than control. Itlithane was a Sylvani war mage who had joined the rebellion and was assigned to work with human tacticians. She had studied warfare for centuries, but had never encountered anything like human military doctrine. The humans seemed to treat battle as an art form, where creativity was more important than following established rules. The first phase of Operation Wildcard began when Captain Turner's stealth ships attacked a Kithran supply depot that had no strategic value. The base was lightly defended and served only to store non-essential materials. The attack made no military sense, but it accomplished something more important. It made Kithrin commanders question their assumptions. Similar strikes occurred across enemy territory, as human forces hit targets that seemed random. Museums, communication stations, food processing plants, and recreational facilities were attacked, while important military installations were ignored. The pattern was so illogical that enemy analysts spent valuable time trying to understand what humans were really planning. Tracy Miller's hybrid weapons were deployed for the first time during these raids. Human soldiers carried devices that could phase through solid matter, create temporary gravity wells, and manipulate electromagnetic fields in ways that violated everything the Kithrin thought they knew about technology. The psychological effect was immediate. Kithrin forces began to doubt their intelligence reports, their tactical doctrine, and even their understanding of basic physics. Human weapons worked in ways that should not be possible, and human tactics followed no recognizable pattern. General Hayes watched the enemy response with satisfaction. Kithrin fleets were splitting up to defend installations that had no real importance, while leaving actual strategic targets vulnerable. The alien commanders were thinking like conventional military leaders, while humans were playing an entirely different game. Misirithil proved invaluable in the second phase of Wildcard. Her understanding of Kithrin culture allowed her to predict how their commanders would react to specific types of provocation. She helped design attacks that would trigger particular responses based on alien psychology and military traditions. The major test came at the Proxima Gate, a strategic choke point that controlled access to the inner human colonies. Kithrin forces assembled a massive fleet to capture the gate, expecting humans to defend it with everything they had. Instead, they found something completely unexpected. Captain Turner had positioned her stealth ships throughout the system, but not in defensive formations. Instead, they were scattered in patterns that seemed random until the battle began. When Kithrin ships moved to attack, they found themselves facing enemies from directions that should have been impossible. Human forces used what General Hayes called organized chaos. Every ship captain was given general objectives, but complete freedom in how to achieve them. The result was a battle that looked like complete confusion, but was actually a carefully orchestrated disaster for the enemy. Lieutenant Nina Ross led her enhanced fighter squadron in attacks that defied conventional tactics. Her pilots would engage enemy formations, then suddenly break off to attack completely different targets. The constant movement and unexpected direction changes made it impossible for Kithrin gunners to establish firing solutions. Lisa Thun combined her magical abilities with human military equipment to create effects that terrified enemy soldiers. She could make human ships appear and disappear at will, create false sensor readings that showed attacks coming from empty space, and manipulate gravity to send enemy projectiles back at their launchers. The battle at Proxima Gate lasted 6 hours and ended with complete human victory. A Kithrin force that outnumbered the defenders 10-1 was routed with minimal human casualties. The key was that human forces never fought the battle their enemies expected. Instead, they created their own rules and forced the aliens to play by them. Tracy Miller's greatest success was the quantum disruption mine, a weapon that could make enemy ships forget they existed. For several minutes during this time, the affected vessels would drift helplessly while their crews tried to remember what they were supposed to be doing. The psychological impact was devastating. News of the victory spread rapidly through both human and alien space. Other species that had been conquered by the Kithrin coalition began to take notice. If humans could defeat such overwhelming odds, perhaps freedom was possible for others as well. Vexora received reports of the defeat with growing rage, but also with a grudging respect for human capabilities. She began to realize that her enemy was unlike any species the coalition had ever faced. Humans did not just fight to win, they fought to confuse, demoralize, and convert their enemies. Sylvani Empire was watching the conflict with great interest, and many were beginning to question their forced alliance with the Kithrin Zerothiel. A rebellion was inspiring others to consider whether they too might break free from coalition. Control General Hayes authorized the next phase of Wildcard, which involved attacking Kithran allies rather than Kithran forces directly. Human raids began targeting coalition member species that were held in line through fear rather than loyalty. The goal was not conquest, but liberation. Captain Turner's stealth ships began broadcasting human messages into occupied systems, explaining that freedom was possible, and that Earth stood ready to help any species that chose to rebel. The psychological warfare was as effective as the military campaigns. The third phase culminated in a series of simultaneous attacks across 12 different star systems. Each attack was designed to exploit specific weaknesses in local defenses, while demonstrating human capabilities to populations that had never seen effective resistance to Kithran rule. Tracy Miller's hybrid technology allowed human forces to accomplish feats that seemed magical to both enemies and potential allies. Weapons that could phase through any armor, ships that could become temporarily invisible, and soldiers who could manipulate gravity itself became symbols of hope for oppressed specialists. Athen worked with human engineers to create training programs that could teach other species how to use similar techniques. The War Mage found that human approaches to magic technology were completely different from Sylvani methods, but often more effective in combat situations. The cumulative effect of Operation Wildcard was exactly what General Hayes had intended. Kithran forces were demoralized, confused, and scattered, while potential allies began to see humans as liberators, rather than just another species fighting for survival. Rothiel reported that several Sylvani military units had begun refusing orders to attack human targets, and were instead requesting transfers to non-combat duties. The princess believed that a full Sylvani withdrawal from the coalition was becoming more likely with each human victory. As the third phase of the war concluded, human forces had achieved something unprecedented in galactic history. They had taken the initiative away from a vastly superior enemy through sheer creativity and refusal to accept conventional limitations. The art of human war was proving more effective than alien science. The Kithran coalition was beginning to fracture as member species questioned whether their masters were truly invincible, and humans prepared for the next phase of their campaign to show the galaxy that freedom was worth fighting for regardless of the odds. Admiral Susan Carter stood on the bridge of the flagship Defiance, watching as the combined human and Sylvani fleet prepared for the largest offensive operation in the war. Zarathiel had done more than just rebel against the Kithran coalition. She had revealed herself as the rightful heir to the Sylvani throne, and was leading her people toward complete independence. Major Kelly Anderson was preparing for ground operations on worlds that had never seen human soldiers before. Her specialty was fighting in alien environments, and she had trained extensively using data provided by Sylvani allies. Every world in the galaxy had different conditions, but Earth's incredible environmental diversity had prepared humans for almost anything. Dr. Amanda Clark now worked directly with Sylvani scientists in a joint research facility that produced new technologies faster than either species could alone. The combination of human innovation and Sylvani magical science was creating weapons and tools that were revolutionizing warfare across the galaxy. The Sylvani Empire had officially declared independence from the Kithran coalition in a ceremony broadcast across hundreds of star systems. Zarathiel stood before representatives of dozens of species and announced that her people would no longer serve as enforcers for an empire built on oppression, and Farther Comoran was a Kithran general who had begun to study human military tactics after suffering several defeats at their hands. He was one of the few coalition commanders who recognized that humans represented something completely new in galactic warfare. Their ability to adapt and improvise made them dangerous in ways that could not be countered by superior technology. Alone, the joint human-Sylvani offensive began with coordinated strikes on 12 key coalition strongholds. The attacks were timed to occur simultaneously across a region of space larger than any previous military operation. Each target was chosen not just for its strategic value, but for its symbolic importance to oppressed populations. Admiral Carter commanded the space forces, while Major Anderson led ground operations. The combination proved devastatingly effective. Human adaptability combined with Sylvani precision created tactical advantages that neither species could achieve alone. The first major victory came at the Kepler mining complex, a facility that used slave labor from 6 different species. Human marines and Sylvani warriors fought side by side to liberate workers who had never imagined freedom was possible. The rescued slaves became some of the most effective recruits for the growing rebellion. Dark Clark's breakthrough came when she successfully merged human quantum enhancement technology with Sylvani reality manipulation techniques. The result was a new class of weapons that could adapt their effects based on the target they were fighting. The same device could phase through armor against one enemy and create gravity wells against another. Major Anderson's ground campaigns demonstrated that human environmental adaptability was even more valuable than anyone had realized. Coalition worlds included desert planets with no water, ice worlds with temperatures that could freeze most species, and gas giants where combat took place, in floating cities. Human soldiers, equipped with adaptive gear, could fight effectively in any environment, while their alien enemies often struggled with conditions outside their natural habitat. Anderson's forces used this advantage, ruthlessly striking from environments where coalition troops could not effectively pursue them. Zarathiel's coronation as Sylvani Empress was attended by human diplomatic observers, marking the first time in galactic history that 2 species had formed an alliance based on mutual respect rather than conquest or submission. The ceremony included rituals that honored both human and Sylvani traditions. The psychological impact of the human-Sylvani alliance was enormous across coalition space. Other member species began to question why they served masters who ruled through fear when they could instead join allies who offered partnership. Admiral Carter made sure that every liberated world received the same message: freedom was available to anyone willing to fight for it. Morin found himself in the unusual position of respecting enemies he was supposed to destroy. His analysis of human tactics led him to conclusions that challenged everything the Kithran believed about warfare. Superior technology and numerical advantage meant nothing if your enemy refused to fight according to your expectations. The liberation campaigns expanded rapidly as more species joined. The rebellion human engineers worked with alien technicians to adapt Earth military doctrine to the specific capabilities of each new ally. The result was a growing coalition that shared human values while maintaining the unique strengths of each member species. Dr. Clark and her Sylvani colleagues developed new communication technologies that allowed the rebellion to coordinate across vast distances. The quantum entanglement networks were impossible for coalition forces to intercept or jam, giving the rebels a crucial advantage in intelligence and coordination. Major Anderson led the assault on Vorthan Prime, a heavily fortified world that served as a regional command center for coalition forces. The planet had extreme gravity that would crush most humans, but Anderson's troops used powered exoskeletons and environmental suits that turned the harsh conditions into an advantasta. Battle for Vorthan Prime lasted 3 days and became a symbol of human determination. When coalition defenders thought the attacking force would be slowed by the planet's crushing gravity, they instead found human soldiers who moved faster and hit harder than should have been possible. Admiral Carter's fleet operations showed the full potential of human-Sylvani cooperation. Human ships provided unpredictable tactics and adaptive technology, while Sylvani vessels contributed precision strikes and reality manipulation abilities. The combined fleet could accomplish objectives that would have been impossible for either species. Alana Vexera was forced to acknowledge that her strategy of overwhelming force was failing against enemies who treated conventional military doctrine as merely a starting point. Her frustration led to increasingly desperate measures, including attacks on civilian targets that turned even some Kithran forces against her. The rebellion reached a turning point when 3 major coalition member species declared independence simultaneously and requested human Protection, the Altarian Republic, the Centauri Federation, and the Vegan Trade Alliance all broke their forced treaties with the Kithrin and joined the growing alliance of free worlds. Marin made a decision that would have seemed impossible. Months earlier, he began secretly feeding intelligence to human forces, not because he supported their cause, but because he had come to believe that Vexorus methods were destroying the honor that had once made the Kithrin worthy of respect. Clark's research team achieved another breakthrough when they successfully reverse-engineered Kithrin reality weapons and modified them to work with human quantum signatures. The new weapons could not erase targets from existence, but they could temporarily remove enemy ships from normal space, making them helpless for several minutes. Major Anderson's tactics evolved as she gained experience fighting on alien worlds. She developed new strategies that took advantage of human psychological flexibility, allowing her troops to work effectively with alien allies who had completely different approaches to warfare. The combined offensive reached its climax with simultaneous attacks on the three most important coalition strongholds in the sector. Admiral Carter's fleet engaged the main enemy forces, while Major Anderson's ground troops captured key installations, and Dr. Clark's new weapons disrupted enemy communications. Sheliach participated directly in combat for the first time, leading Sylvani forces in battle alongside human allies. Her presence on the battlefield inspired both species and demonstrated that their alliance was based on shared sacrifice rather than political convenience. The liberation of the Rigel sector marked the first time in galactic history that the Kithrin coalition had lost control of an entire region of space. The symbolic victory was as important as the strategic one, proving that the seemingly invincible empire could be defeated. As the fourth phase of the war concluded, the rebellion had grown from a desperate and human defense into a galactic movement for freedom. Admiral Carter's forces controlled key strategic positions, while Major Anderson's ground operations had liberated dozens of worlds. The Kithrin coalition was no longer the dominant power in the galaxy. Instead, it faced a growing alliance of free species, led by humans and Sylvani, who had demonstrated that cooperation was more powerful than conquest. The chains that had bound the stars were beginning to break. President Rachel Martinez sat in the Oval Office watching reports from across the galaxy as the final phase of the war began. Her sister Lisa was leading the assault on the Kithrin home system, while she made the political decisions that would shape the future of galactic civilization. The choice between vengeance and justice would define humanity's legacy among the stars. Commander Lisa Martinez stood on the bridge of the flagship Liberation as the combined fleet of free worlds approached. The Kithrin capital system, the Armada, included ships from 40 different species, all united in their determination to end the Coalition's reign of terror. She felt the weight of history, knowing that the next few hours would determine whether freedom or tyranny would dominate the galaxy. Captain Holly Davis was preparing for the most important mission of her career, as test pilot for the new hybrid starfighters that represented the future of human Sylvani. Cooperation. Her squadron included pilots from both species flying ships that combined the best of human adaptability and elven precision. The Kithrin home system was the most heavily defended location in known space, with weapons platforms that could destroy entire fleets and shield generators that had never been penetrated. Vexora had retreated there with the remains of her forces, determined to make a final stand that would either restore coalition dominance or end in mutual destruction. Zoratially now wore the crown of the Sylvani Empire, but she had chosen to join the final battle personally. Her presence aboard the Liberation symbolized the alliance between their peoples, and her tactical knowledge of Kithrin defenses was crucial to the success of their mission. Final battle began, not with massive fleet engagements, but with a broadcast transmitted across the entire galaxy. Commander Martinez spoke directly to the peoples of every coalition world, offering amnesty to any forces that surrendered, while promising justice for those who had committed war crimes. President Martinez had authorized her sister to offer terms that shocked military advisors on both sides. Kithrin soldiers, who laid down their weapons would be allowed to return home, while officers who had followed illegal orders would face trial, but not execution. Only the top leadership would be held fully accountable for their crimes. Captain Davis led her hybrid fighter squadron in the first wave of attacks against the orbital defense platforms. Her pilots moved with coordination that seemed impossible, as human unpredictability combined with Silvani precision to create attacks that the automated defenses could not counter. The response to the human broadcast was immediate across the Kytherin fleet. Individual ships began to surrender, as crews realized they were fighting not for their empire's survival, but for the preservation of a system that had oppressed them as much as their Inamias Vexra watched her forces defect. In growing rage and desperation, she activated the planet's ultimate defense system, a network of reality weapons designed to erase the entire star system rather than allow it to fall to enemy forces. The plan would destroy billions of coalition citizens. Along with the attacking fleet, Commander Martinez detected the charging weapons and faced a choice that would define humanity's character. She could retreat and allow the coalition to destroy itself, or she could risk everything to save both enemies and allies. The decision took less than a second. The human fleet accelerated toward the planet, rather than away from it, as Captain Davis led bombing runs against a reality weapon network, while ground forces prepared for the most dangerous assault in military history. The message was clear: humans would risk their own destruction to prevent a greater tragedy. Erathiel coordinated Silvani forces in a desperate race against time, using their reality manipulation abilities. Elven ships began to disrupt the weapon network, while human engineers worked to permanently disable the system. The cooperation between species reached levels that had never been achieved before. The breakthrough came when Dr. Amanda Clark realized that the same quantum immunity that had protected humans from the original reality shatter could be used to shield the entire planet. Her hybrid technology created a protective field that prevented the doomsday weapons from firing. Vexara's final gambit had failed, and her remaining forces were surrendering faster than she could stop them. Faced with inevitable defeat and the collapse of everything she had built, she made one last desperate attempt to restore her empire's honor through single combat. Commander Martinez accepted the challenge not because she wanted personal glory, but because she understood that some conflicts could only be ended by facing them directly. The duel would be broadcast across the galaxy, and its outcome would determine whether the coalition's surrender was honorable or humiliating. The fight took place aboard the coalition flagship, with representatives from dozens of species watching as two women battled for the future of galactic civilization. Vec was stronger and more experienced, but Martinez had something more important: the knowledge that she was fighting for principles rather than power. The duel ended when Martinez had Vexera at her mercy, but chose to offer surrender rather than death. The moment was captured by cameras throughout the galaxy, as humanity demonstrated that true strength lay not in the ability to destroy enemies, but in the wisdom to create allies. President Martinez announced the formation of the Terran Silvani Cooperative, a new galactic government based on voluntary membership and mutual respect, rather than conquest and submission. The organization would be open to any species that accepted its founding principles of freedom, justice, and cooperation. Davis's hybrid fighters became the symbol of the new age, as squadrons of human and Silvani pilots worked together to patrol liberated space. The sight of former enemies flying in perfect formation represented hope for a future where diversity was strength rather than division. The war crimes tribunals that followed were conducted with fairness that surprised. Former coalition members Vexara and other leaders faced justice, but were treated humanely, while lower-ranking officers and soldiers were offered opportunities to help rebuild what they had once helped. Destro Azarathiel's coronation ceremony was repeated across the galaxy as the Terran Silvani Cooperative was formally established. The new government included representatives from every member species, with decisions made through consensus rather than domination. The reconstruction phase showed the true nature of Earth's response to threats, rather than seeking revenge for the attacks on human worlds. The cooperative provided aid to former coalition planets helping them establish democratic governments and rebuild their economies. Commander Martinez found herself promoted to the first Director of Galactic Security, a position that required her to work with former enemies. To maintain peace, the irony was not lost on her that the woman who had once refused to surrender was now responsible for ensuring that others could surrender safely. The establishment of joint colonies, where humans and Sylvani lived and worked together, became the model for interspecies cooperation. Children of both species learned each other's languages and customs, while their parents collaborated on projects that benefited everyone. President Martinez's decision to offer mercy rather than vengeance proved to be humanity's greatest strategic victory. Former coalition worlds joined the cooperative, voluntarily attracted by the promise of partnership rather than subjugation. The new government grew stronger through inclusion rather than conquests. The final scene of the Great War took place in the same conference room where it had all begun. Commander Martinez and Empress Zarathiel met to plan joint exploration missions to unknown sectors of the galaxy their partnership represented everything that humanity stood for, the belief that former enemies could become trusted allies. Ships from dozens of species prepared to explore the unknown regions beyond Coalition space. The galaxy had learned an important lesson about how Earth responds to threats. Humans did not simply fight to win, they fought to transform conflict into cooperation, and enemies into friends. The legacy of the war was not the destruction of the Kithran coalition, but the creation of something better, a galactic civilization based on freedom rather than fear, cooperation rather than conquest, and hope rather than despair. The superweapon that was meant to erase humanity from existence had instead given birth to a new age of peace and prosperity. The story ended where it began, with a meeting between species, but this time the discussion was about shared dreams rather than mutual threats. The galaxy had learned that when faced with extinction, humanity's response was not just to survive, but to ensure that others could survive alongside them in freedom and dignity.